Well, thank you so much for having us again here tonight. We've been working for the last month and a half on the Beagle Club property, doing a lot of site investigation, a lot of listening sessions, a public survey, coming up with ideas, and we're here tonight to present our first concept ideas for what could take place at the property. Try again.
You just tell me next slide.
All right, next slide. Thank you. We'll go the old-fashioned way. All right, so just, you've all had a chance to meet me, but for everyone who hasn't heard me speak yet or met me before, so I'm a senior program manager at ENLP Associates. I'm an engineer and landscape architect. My team working with me is Jim Kyle is our professional planner. Matt Connors, Chris are really part of our QA/QC team. And then Matt Popin, our wetland scientist, Megan, who's here tonight as our project engineer, Pearl, another one of our landscape architects, have all been hard at work on this team and on this project. Yeah. So just timeline to date, we spent September doing pre-design analysis. So what that means, we had a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the month. We've been on the site several times. We had a joint public meeting with the environmental and historic commissions towards the end of September, and we've had various listening sessions with council. So really kind of like a due diligence month. That's kind of given way into October, where we are tonight on the 13th. We had a public survey that was up on the website, which we got over 700 responses to at the beginning of October, which was great. And then I really want to highlight, we'll return to this in more detail at the end of this presentation, but we've got an upcoming community feedback and listening session a week from today on the 20th, which we're really looking forward to engaging with the public directly on this project. And then after October, it'll be kind of ongoing development of the concepts you see here tonight. Next. All right, so the existing conditions on the site. We've got 176 acres here. This is a big parcel. Other than the existing Beagle Clubhouse building, it's undeveloped. So it's got a lot of surrounding residential development around it, but the site itself is largely a mix of woodlands and meadows. Next. So some drone photography that the township has had done of this site. You can really see kind of the expansive meadow fields in the center of the site and along the entry. And then it gives way to a mix of hardwood woodland species towards the back of the site. Some more specific on the ground shots, there is a small stream that forms the entire northwest back perimeter of the site, a gravel entry road. You can see the Beagle Clubhouse, and then some of the open fields at the front of the site and back by the transmission lines, which cut through the back half. So just zooming out a little bit, talking about kind of that residential pressure that's all around the site. We envision a lot of people as this park develops wanting to come from the surrounding neighborhoods, potentially even further at a site this size. I could easily see this being a regional draw, especially with how close it is to the municipal lines for the neighboring townships. So I think you'll get a lot of people in and outside of Evesham looking to come to this park. Easy access to from some major roads. So this is looking at a walk radius. So the inner circle is about a quarter mile or 5-minute walk, then a half mile, all the way out to a mile. So great access, touches a lot of people. It's gonna be a draw. Again, looking at those existing conditions, you really got the open area as you come in. The Beagle Club has managed this as a meadow with various mow paths through it during the time they've been on the site. And then there's kind of a mix of a little bit higher, drier areas, which are labeled upland forest in this diagram. And as you move back to the site, it gets lower and lower as you come to the stream tributary and it's kind of lowland forest or lowland meadow that's a little bit wetter conditions. Some species on site. Our wetland scientist has prepared an environmental assessment of the site, but it's pretty healthy. There's a lot of really good indicator species for both trees, shrubs, and herbaceous and grass layers throughout the site. Really good opportunity for pollinator habitat and other types of fauna to want to come and habitat on the site. There are some invasive species present throughout, both in the meadow areas back in the woodlands. Some of the highlights that could cause the most issues are actually backed by the transmission lines, including Phragmites and a weed called mile a minute. Those could really get out of control if not kind of managed and kept or tried to be removed from that transmission line area. But there are spots of areas in need of management kind of throughout the site as well. Fauna, again, we saw a heron on site, we saw deer running everywhere, we saw a variety of butterflies out in the meadow areas and bees. It also looks like very good habitat for long-eared bat. And again, there's a fuller list which we're compiling from the state on potential habitat and fauna that would be attracted to the type of species we're seeing throughout the site. So a lot of ecological services potential for the site.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
These were live pictures you took there? These are not like still pictures, are they? Are these pictures you took on site?
It's a combination. Some
Okay.
of them are still that we just took to be representative, but we did see all 5 that you see on the screen on the site in person. Just some soils on site. The soil mapping in the area kind of backs up what we saw firsthand. There's high groundwater. There's a lot of habitat, but there's also probably not a lot of drainage due to what we anticipate would be a high water table. And it's generally supportive of the types of species we saw on site. And drainage, relatively flat, not a lot of dips or hills. Everything just kind of gently slopes to the back to the northwest and gets wetter the further you get towards the tributary. All right, so some scale comparisons. We find these pretty helpful to try to put an image for everyone of how much space you actually have to work with. So the upper left is the Beagle Club site, and it's compared to other sites around the township or the one Laurel Acre Park, which is very close by in Mount Laurel. So you can see it's almost double the size of any of the kind of next largest park venues. And a lot of these other park venues also have kind of big programmatic draws like athletic facilities, which this site wouldn't have. So you really have an opportunity to kind of be a unique, more passive focused park here. It doesn't need to have the same burden of parking, which we have a couple other diagrams upcoming here to show you. What does a 1,000-person crowd look like, right? If you had a big seasonal event where you wanted to have a bunch of people come for one weekend, still very small footprint on a site this size. What does a 1-mile trail loop look like, right? We can easily fit a couple miles of trails on the site. Next. So a couple of parking comparisons. This is Laurel Acres. Next. So this is a 4.5-acre managed pond. It's got a larger 5 to 12 playground area in the lower left, 2 pavilions, a restroom facility, a smaller tot lot, only about 130 so parking spaces to kind of service that whole area. There's a whole bunch on the other side of the park by the athletic facilities. I took my kids here on a Saturday, gorgeous weather. Both pavilions were packed with 2 birthday parties, and the whole back kind of 43 space overflow parking area was still completely empty. So that's how much it indicates that people who live out here are either biking or walking, or they're kind of all carpooling. And so you might not need the tremendous amount of parking you might originally think for the type of more passive programming that might take shape at the Beagle Club. Next. Very close to where we are now, the playground over by the Memorial Fields. Next. Again, small under half-acre playground next to restroom and pavilion structure, and about 24 dedicated spaces directly, with direct walking access to the playground. There's others spotted around the fields, but this is kind of the dedicated lot to the playground. Next. So looking at Savage Field, next again. Just highlighting, this is an example of something a little more open and how you might address overflow parking for a big event. So there's kind of structured area for around 84 to 100 spots, you know, where the two gravel drives are. Then there's the wide open gravel space, which again would probably support, give or take, another 100 spaces. And then you've got kind of 2-acre kind of central lawn area that could easily be taken over for parking if you have, again, the one-off big event here, but otherwise is just kept as an open space. So again, I mean, you're looking at maybe 3 acres total of parking to accommodate a huge event. So next. So that's just kind of like a baseline to set you up for kind of things that we had in mind while looking and considering the site. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Megan here, who's going to go over the different listening sessions and survey results we've got to date.
Hi, everyone. We are excited to get a chance to listen to everyone on this council and to get results for the survey. We want the park to be a responsive design to what the community wants and needs. So the first thing we did is we sat down and we talked with council members. We talked with the Historic Preservation and Environmental Commissions, and we got some verbal feedback. We took notes, we put them together, and we drew some conclusions from what we heard. So you can see that there's a lot of desire to keep natural habitats and to highlight ecosystem services on site. There's excitement about what is on site, and we want to make sure that we are highlighting that and we're giving people access to that. So pollinator gardens and native plantings. There was a desire to keep the parking footprint light by some so that we can preserve the ecosystem surrounding, or at least use materials sensitive to the environment. So maybe that is pervious pavement or something like that. And then the light sensitivity was also a concern. If we're putting a lot of lighting in a natural environment, would that be a concern for insects and wildlife? For the community, they wanted large spaces. There was a need for parking. As you'll see later, a lot of people intend to use this site and access it by car. Neighborhood connectivity is a concern. You saw Ed put a map up there of surrounding neighborhoods. There's a lot of walk radius overlap with those neighborhoods. Accessibility is a concern. There also was some programming desires, so we'll get into that more, but the opportunities for trails are pretty great on this site. We've got a large site, and people want to walk it. There's a desire for play, and specifically nature play, that seemed to get people excited. And then looking more at the educational opportunities on site, just to learn about the natural systems or just have a venue for educational events, as well as a venue for arts and culture on the site. And then we did hear some concerns about maintenance needs and security on site, as well as some amenities such as restrooms. Next. So our public survey was out for about a week online, and we got over 700 responses and some really good feedback, both in people filling out the survey and writing in. So the first question was just to get an idea of who was taking the survey. We did see that most of the responses were from Evesham Township residents, which was great to know that the survey was pretty representative of the township that the park will be in. And we did see a lot of families taking the survey as well. Next. The age demographic is interesting. You can see that not a lot of young people did take the survey. So we're excited for a community engagement opportunity next week to see if younger people are brought and if we can engage them in what they're looking for. Most of the people taking the survey were 25 to 44. So if that is representative of the people using the park, then we'll need to anticipate some growth in the older age groups as the park is designed and constructed. And we asked people how they're getting to the park. Over 2.5 times the number of anybody else, they wanted to drive there. So we have some people interested in walking, not a lot for public transportation, and some biking. We did look at opportunities then for parking on site, as you'll see later in the design alternatives. Question 4, why are people coming to the park? We know how they're getting there, but why? So most of the people were interested in engaging in the outdoor opportunities and really looking for some green space in the community. Second, and was a little more surprising, is that most people are looking for exercise and fitness. That's the second most popular response, followed just by reduced stress and unwind, which is pretty popular in public green space. That's good to hear for a passive park too. Exercise and fitness might take the shape of trails or fitness stations, so that can be interpreted in a lot of ways. And next. And then we asked people what they wanted to see in their park more specifically. So you can see the first tier of most popular responses was for some basic park amenities. We expected to get a lot of good feedback on this, and it just reaffirms what we thought we would need to include in the park. So that's seating, bathrooms, trails, trees, and shade. The next tier of most popular programming that people wanted, car parking was the top of this tier. Again, people are concerned that there will not be enough parking for the site, so we're hoping to address those concerns. Native plantings and nature stations, ways to engage differently with the natural environment. Flexible space, open space, play areas were also popular. And then the third tier was more of some niche interests, and we still got some good responses on those too. Next. So for the write-ins for this, we did see, we know that this is going to be a passive park. There were some write-ins for some smaller active programming, such as shuffleboard and pickleball and tennis. So we did show these here, and they would be a relatively large or small footprint on site compared to other active programming at active parks. And the trails, there was people who wanted to use the trails for a number of different reasons, including equestrian, bike, running, and just having connections to their neighborhoods. Water features were pretty popular as well, and people interpreted that differently. So that might include splash pads, just simply water fountains or water bottle refilling stations, opportunities for fishing, and then open space, flexible space. People wanted opportunities to see the historic value on site, and they were interested in how the building would be preserved or reused. Next. And we asked people what they wanted to see sustainably on this site, because we know that they're interested in, there's a lot of interest in this community in particular and preserving what's there and celebrating it. So what else could be included to advance that? Well, trees were very popular, as well as pollinator gardens, rain gardens, open space. And then some other features were also getting some good traction, like renewable energy. And specifically, we heard some feedback on solar panels for that. Next. I'm going to pass it back to Ed now, and he can go a little bit deeper into the park goals and design.
So after hearing all that feedback, the survey results, we started to kind of, themes started to emerge. So for us, there were really kind of 4 key goals that we were viewing this park should have based on all the feedback. So one is stewardship and that conservation of what's there and management of the ecosystem services at the park. Health and wellness, some form of fitness and being outdoors and healthy and with nature. Connection, a community gathering space, and culture, the idea of art and history being present in the park. So stewardship, this is really about protecting and enhancing the ecological services on site. Some examples of the way that could manifest itself is habitat structures throughout the site, signage about pollinator gardens, managed open meadow spaces, both wet and upland, water features, the use of renewable energy for any type of park power, education, like bird observation towers or blinds, signage and outdoor classroom spaces. If we're preserving and conserving this land, we want to tell people what's going on. So when they come out and they see habitat structures or they see maybe a working landscape that someone is taking care of, the process and what's going on is explained to them and they get that education out of it. On the health and wellness side, running, walking, biking are all desirable and easily incorporated on the site. We also think there's an opportunity for play and nature play to get the younger population out and engaged with nature in a healthy way. Some examples of nature play that would be relevant for this type of site is, more naturalistic features done out of, sustainably harvested hardwood, ropes courses, play mounds, stumps, and, twig structures and houses for kids to play in. Splash pads. These are typically done in a little more of a formal playground area, but we'd be excited to tackle how they could manifest in a more of a nature play setting, whether that's troughs. It's done with stone, natural materials, kind of creating little gullies. You can see in the upper left image, those kids are riding the seesaw in order to make the water come out. So any way that they're actually manipulating the water or causing it to do what it's doing, we think is is the way to pursue this if we did pursue this type of water feature on the park. Fitness stations, again, we think, very light footprint, easily incorporated into a trail system. They can be done a variety of different ways with more natural materials or structures that people can actually use and do presses or lunges or jumps with. Connection. We want people to gather. We want the park to be able to support a larger gathering. We know there's a desire for pavilions and other structures that people can kind of rent or use for special events. So again, some examples, people might gather for, a Friends of the Beagle Club meeting. A school group might come on the site. Someone might have a wedding reception there or take their wedding photos on the site. A lot of people might just want to come and picnic out in the open, kind of in the gorgeous landscape that's there. Next. There's also the opportunity for seasonal events. I don't know if anyone here took a trip into Philadelphia this past year. It was the first time they did the flower show outdoors. It was a big success to kind of maybe let your local horticultural community come in for a season, have an area to kind of do floral displays, and then take it down at the end of the season. Be a great way to interact with local businesses and also do something kind of unique on the site. There's opportunity for farmers markets, art shows, tractor rides, community gardens. Some of these didn't get a lot of feedback in the survey, but they're options. And the site's large enough and has enough flexibility that you could kind of always look at it if the appetite for certain things grows or decreases over time with your community. Pavilion structures, you'll see in the upcoming design alternatives that there's a few different locations that we're recommending these around the site. It makes sense to have a few at a few different scales. We're kind of picturing that there's at least one that's kind of a main one attached to bathrooms maybe, and then there's other ones that are more at outlying areas of the park to support different programming needs. Celebrating the local art and history of the site. This would include an eventual adaptive reuse of the Beagle Clubhouse itself, and also the idea of sculpture and artworks out on the site. So example of art installations, artists do a lot of very cool things. They could honestly make some of the nature play structures that then become used by the community. They can do installations like you've seen on the upper left, where you kind of give them an open space on site and see what they come in with. The materials we use on site could also be used in an artful manner in how paths, seating walls, etc. are made. The clubhouse, these are just some other historic buildings that we've incorporated in sites around the state. A lot of times we see them kind of either preserved in place and they can be looked at or kind of walked through as a historic artifact. A lot of times they're converted to Parks and Rec staff offices, a very common reuse of historic structures. Sometimes they'll have a historic display in one of the ground floor rooms about the history of the site, and then also double as an office space. Next. All right, so those are kind of the site research, the feedback, kind of the goals and precedents that we had in mind. Now going to show design alternatives. We've got two options to show you. Each one also has a couple options in it to kind of show you the flexibility in the framework of each plan, and that are not locked into anything that we're showing tonight. These are kind of the first ideas, and there's a lot of flexibility. So without further ado, we've gone through a lot of options. This is just a small collection of all the different drawings and ideas that have kind of ended up on the cutting room floor to get to what we're about to show. Next. So alternative one is based on the existing grid of the site. It's been managed as a grid. It's really interesting to go back through Google Earth and look at the timeline of aerials and see how that grid has morphed over years. But it has been mowed in a grid-like fashion for a long time. So this is really kind of embracing that and building on that inherent structure that's currently there. Next, we think there's a lot of different ways to interact with a grid. It lends itself to kind of each plot being a different horticultural display. You can mow larger sections out of the grid to create larger opening areas. You can create groves within the grid. You can interact with topography and topographic hills. You can let the woodland kind of continue to bleed into it and the process of succession happen, and then kind of make that transparent to the community with signage. So there's a lot of different ways to interact with it. Next. So scheme one. Just kind of walk from the entry on Elmwood towards the back of the site here. Kind of the yellow dots you see are connections to surrounding communities. So really there's a vehicular loop that would bring you in through the center of the site to kind of a big floral display in the middle. That's a sculpture garden. The clubhouse is preserved, number 1 on the screen. Parking is any number 2s that you see kind of at the site entry and a lawn area and pavilion there. So that's more of a typical open passive park flex lawn space for people to use or for event gathering. And then you kind of come back into a grove. We like this idea of this grove threshold before you get through it, and the site really opens up into the open meadow area and sculpture garden area. You move back, number 6 in the center into the big open meadow space is kind of where you have the nature playground area. Tucked back to the right as a reveal, number 7 would be kind of a pond lake water feature. It could be stocked with fish. It could just be to look at and picnic next to. We would put another pavilion structure back towards that. And then, the back of the site, we say, leave it wild. We work in a trail system to it. There could be fitness stations along it, but people are back there hiking, biking, walking through the existing woodlands until they circle back out to the front. Next. So a little more detail. So this front entry area, kind of the great lawn space, if you will. So you have your kind of front parking. People could rent out this pavilion structure. If you did want to have more light recreational games like bocce courts or a pickleball court or something, this would be where you'd want to put it. And you've got like this big flexible lawn space for people to use if they want to play disc golf, if they want to play ultimate frisbee, they can do that. If they want to kind of reserve the whole space, or you want to have a movie in the park night, this would be the spot to do it. Next. So you kind of move back to the center. This is more of a curated, managed take on a sculpture walk. So think more of almost this is like an outdoor arboretum type setup. You'd have to have the staff to manage this. Sculptures could rotate through. But it's a more formal take on a sculpture garden. And then you move back into the open area. You'd have the managed meadows with the mow paths. You'd kind of have more of a nature-themed treehouse type structures in a play area under canopy trees. And then you'd kind of have the idyllic-looking lake tucked in the back. And then when you get back into the trails, there could be a variety of materials here, again, depending on the accessibility of each route. But there could be areas that take shape as a fitness station. It could be an outdoor classroom. Kids could use it as nature play, depending on how it's set up, a la the upper right, which is from Black Run Preserve. Some of the trails might just be packed earth or mown the way they currently are. On the left is an example of a couple different types of trails. This is from one of our Arboretum projects. There may be a need for something that's more paved or reinforced for maintenance access. But then you see crossing the image a trail of stone fines, which is more the pedestrian hiking trail at that Arboretum. Next. So then an option. So we just looked at option A on the left. Option B, again, kind of same setup, but different programming, different feel to what would be there. So instead of the more formal sculpture garden, you have a sculpture walk in the meadow. So it's meadow. It looks a lot like what's out there, and you have these areas carved out for seating and sculpture. The same with the play. This one could include a spray ground. It's just open in the meadow. It's more topographic hills and structures, no overhead canopy. And then in the back, instead of creating a lake structure, you're more working with the existing conditions and creating a constructed wetland that would have boardwalks through it. Next, and so some examples. Lower image is a constructed wetland. Upper left, an example of sculpture out in just a more open, wild space instead of a kind of curated garden space. An example of spray ground and more of natural materials. All right, next. Circulation, so we're thinking the pink line is kind of a vehicular loop in and out of the site and keeping vehicles as contained and towards the front as possible. Then you kind of got in the orange in the middle, what would be primary circulation paths in kind of the heart of the site. Then in blue are kind of the major neighborhood connective sites, and then everything else is more of a tertiary path for either it's a mow path, it's a trail, it's for hiking, biking, but it's not a primary way of getting around the site. All right, that was option one. Pause. Option two is more organic looking. This theme of kind of ribbons weaving in and out of the site, kind of picking up on how it might turn out if you let the grid go and nature more take its course, or took kind of our formal cues more of on natural kind of patterns. So here, again, kind of starting at the front, you kind of swoop into the middle of the site and a loop. You kind of pass an open earthen amphitheater on your right, number 10, when you walk in. Kind of the lower part of the image, number 6, we're calling a history walk. Here, kind of the existing grid is preserved exactly how it is with signage. It attaches to the parking lot in the Beagle Clubhouse, number 1. So you can see the clubhouse, and then you can kind of go on this historic walk of how they've maintained the property and the fields and loop back to the clubhouse if you want. So it's kind of the preserved historic area of how they've used the site. The north side of that entry drive, you see in more of the yellow, is kind of a managed meadow area with a lot of crisscrossing paths. There could be observation towers in these paths, outdoor classrooms in these paths. You could change the pattern in how you mow the paths over the year if you needed to create larger or smaller spaces within the network. Inside the smaller oval, you've kind of got the open, flexible lawn space and a playground. And then you move to a bigger lake area in the center in the managed meadow. And then again, the rear is kept relatively as is with trails running through it. So an example of that front area of an amphitheater, an example of what parking might look like on a more passive site. This is from one of our projects up in Mercer Meadows. So you can see kind of a small footprint compost bathroom, parking area for an open area. Again, what movie night at the amphitheater might look like in the big open space. So you get to the middle, and again, so, versus what's out there now kind of in the managed grid, which would be on the lower, you could have something a little more vibrant in the meadow structure with the lower right image and kind of the yellow areas you see on screen. The play area kind of be this combination of the nature hills combined with maybe some more traditional equipment. in kind of the center upper part of the interior oval. And then you move out more into open expanse. Again, the open meadow with still opportunity for sculpture. You know, it's a sculptural deer, not a real one in the lower right. And then again, you know, kind of that picturesque pavilion overlooking the lake. Next. And then when you move into the back, you're still kind of considering the same material palette for trails. Some might be mowed or just earthen trails, kind of like what's out there. Some would get a different type of material, such as stone fines. And again, if we're moving through any really wet areas, there might be a boardwalk structure. So again, option A is what we just looked at on the left. Option B, so again, you know, same structure and armature to the site, but variations in programming and field. So here, in some of the listening sessions, there's an opportunity for maybe another building to come on site. This is showing number 5. If there were to be like a future arts culture center on the project, I think it'd be really cool to put it in the heart of the site, both looking back at the Beagle Clubhouse to the south, and then overlooking the meadow to the north across a water feature. The water feature is smaller, moved further into the site, and then you're really leaving the open meadow structure for pavilions, outdoor classrooms, observation towers, and you're kind of sliding the nature play in along the woodland edge rather than being out in the open. So just some examples of, you know, the nature play kind of moving more into the tree line on the upper left there. And then the other images on the upper right is an example of, you know, you might have a future arts culture center out there. If it's something really open and transparent, I think an architecture team would love the opportunity to come up with that kind of structure for the site. And then the lower left, you know, more of a pavilion out in space that could take shape here. So circulation here, again, we're central spine in pink of vehicular circulation coming in and turning back out, trying to keep it as tight into the front as possible. Kind of the big orange loop in the middle is the primary pedestrian circulation. The blue paths are the main neighborhood connectors pulling from the back, and then kind of everything else is more of a tertiary mode path or trail. Next. So kind of going back to option A for each of them side by side. We do have following slides on the plan for the community engagement session next week, but I kind of wanted to pause here and talk about these before showing those, if that's okay. So happy to discuss and have any questions. You know, we tried to really vary them so that there's a lot to talk about. It's entirely cool to say, don't like this, or I wish I could pull this from A and put it in B, and you know, we're excited to hear the feedback. Thank you.
Oh, I'll start by saying thank you so much for all the work on it, and I know you've spent a lot of time talking to people in the community, reviewing the survey results, and both very creative ideas. So it's definitely something that I wouldn't be able to think of, so I appreciate your knowledge on this.
Thank you.
I do like, in my opinion, I like preserving some of the grid work, so I appreciate in the ribbons that you kept some of the historic grid work. And I do like keeping the traffic towards the front of the site so it doesn't go back in the back, and really giving the nature part in the back for the trails. I like both designs a lot, so I'll let
Great.
council, if you have questions, comments, or,
If I may, I have a,
yes, Councilman.
Ed, I would just like to say that you really know how to build suspense with waiting. I was like, what is he gonna show us? Well, I have 2 questions. It looks like on a couple of them, there's a lot of space that's still not being used as far as with the trails. Is there any way that we can make sure that we're using more of the space if we're gonna create more like pollinator gardens and things like that? Because it seems like everything is up towards the front.
Yeah, so kind of the light green that you see in kind of the front areas, everything in front of the dark green to the back, those are all kind of the existing mow paths there that we're relatively leaving. So those are all walkable. I think there's a lot of ways a pedestrian could find their way through kind of the front areas. To the rear, yes, we could add more. that's where we're anticipating kind of the most wetland areas to work around are in the rear, so that would kind of be the main constraint to work with. But yeah, we kind of tried to pick a middle ground, but there's nothing holding back from more length of trails being added around the site.
And the other question I had was concerning like safety and security. Like, how do you plan, or is there any way that you're able to put an overlay as far as safety?
Yes, there is. So what I would anticipate is that there's some sort of controlled access at the entry to the park and in parking areas. Lighting is part of security. Your operational protocols on whether it's a dawn to dusk park or open at evenings will kind of tie into that. So there's physical things we can add to keep people in or out as best we're able in certain areas. There's lighting is a component of security and making sure people feel safe. There's park staff being present in certain areas and instances. And then there's engendering ownership of the space by the community and people really feeling like it's visible. They're going to see people they know there. They're going to have pride in it. They're going to take care of it. And that'll help too, that it's owned, managed, maintained. And people see a clean, safe, vibrant park and they'll treat it as such. But yes, we can add on the next go around here kind of an overlay of safety measures and where we would recommend putting certain types of things for discussion.
Or like call buttons or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So, like there could be a call box station, not only up front, but I think especially back in the trails,
Right.
If someone has an accident back there. That's why access to the trails is important, and ultimately, if someone gets hurt in the back right corner, can an emergency vehicle get to them, or can another vehicle get to them and get them back to the front where a more traditional ambulance can get to them? So those are all layers that would need a discussion on the next phase of this.
Mayor?
Deputy Mayor?
Was that it,
Yeah,
Councilman?
that's
Okay.
all I had.
I think that it's phenomenal to have an eye for that and to really have that knowledge and to gather all the feedback and make it into a thing, like design. It's amazing. And I did not give the input because it was more important to me that the community and folks gave their input first, and then I could kind of say, here's, what I think, because I think we represent the public and it's important to get the public's input on something that's going to be here much longer than I will be, that's for sure. So my question though is, for the surrounding neighborhoods that do align the area, it seemed in almost all the designs, and I could have missed it, that one or two communities aren't linked into the access. Is that accurate? And I think consideration be made that every community has some level of access, and that those access links do have those safety mechanisms. I think that's really important. We've learned a lot from communities in the Philadelphia area, Central Park areas, that how important the safety is. So I echo Councilman Freeman's thoughts on that. And I know that's some of the feedback I have heard from people who live in those areas right now, because they talk about how sometimes people are out in the woods and they're not sure what that means. So that would be important.
Yeah, there's no reason we can't. There's a couple instances where I think it's Tuxedo Court to the north and Raynard's Run to the south. It doesn't look like there's an obvious publicly owned place to cut through, so you're in the situation of potentially maybe negotiating an access easement with a single family homeowner, which does happen all the time. So I mean, what we could do is we could show locations at every surrounding neighborhood and then just maybe highlight which ones look like it's a simple easement through an already public place. Like some of them, like Country Farms has an obvious basin area with a path to tie into, whereas some may require an easement negotiation to make it work. But yeah, physically, there's nothing stopping us from connecting to everywhere.
Okay, and then with the access, you do have accessibility as one of those elements, but as a part of our master plan and what we're surveying the community right now is accessibility and walkable spaces for people who might use mobilized wheelchairs, as well as access to plug-ins, things like that. So just keeping that in the forefront something that might be walkable for the average person to make sure it's, really accessible to most people in
Yes.
terms of whatever way they use to get around.
Yeah, I think all the community connections, the goal would be that they meet ADA accessibility standards in terms of how they're constructed. In terms of safety and signage, what you would want to do is develop a suite of details about signage, lighting, wayfinding, so that each one looked the same. So it's like no matter what angle you're coming to the park from, you're about to enter the Beagle Club park. And so you would treat each one the same. You could have a call box at each one. So basically the same set of ones at each of the spots you would know, and then it would be an accessible path in terms of materiality and slope from there back into the park.
And that almost any signage would also have braille and things of that nature that
Yes.
people would be able
Yes,
to
yes,
access.
yes. Yeah, that would be a standard for any park signage.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. That's it.
Go this way.
Yeah, you guys did an amazing job. I love the first one, the grids. I like parts of the second one. I like to keep it the way it is. I think it's amazing. My only concern is with the neighborhoods around and giving them access. We're gonna have to do something maybe with those neighborhoods and ask them, get their input for this.
Yeah.
Because, I wouldn't want somebody traipsing along the side of my house in and out and
Right.
into a park. And so we're gonna have to do a lot of community work there with the neighborhoods that are around us. I love what you guys did. I think it's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I
Thank you very
really
much.
will.
So yes, I agree. You guys did an amazing job putting this all together. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it. I also agree that we certainly need some more input from the community. 700 people is a small percentage of our community. So my question is, how many more community engagement opportunities do you plan?
I think that's an open discussion on our upcoming meetings. But what I would recommend is that on the 20th, we'd like to do another survey kind of specifically about this presentation, some of the items, so it gets more specific. I think from then I would start targeting more specific groups or events. So that next round I think is where you start doing the breakout sessions specific to different neighborhoods. You could also do it at specific, fields. Like if we really want to get family input, we go to one of the playgrounds or the sports fields on a weekend where we know it's going to be heavy use, and we survey canvas. Same thing, so I kind of break it up by program too, where we think different types of user groups are going to be to specifically get feedback from those user groups. That's kind of what I would make the second round of engagement.
Excuse me.
Yes, there.
But in your survey, it seemed to be that, I'll say, our seasoned people over the age of 55, 60 and up, there seemed to be an age group that you hadn't tapped into, and then a younger age group, so maybe consider accessing our schools. We have a strong
Yeah.
relationship with our school system in that respect, and then, in terms of our, seasoned community of people, we have ways that we can connect with them.
Yeah.
So, because it seemed like you did get to the families, which is great, but
Right.
I think our parks are used by everyone. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to, focus on just.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see the turnout on the 20th. What I've seen a lot of times too is like when we'll be ready for it, if families bring their kids to the meetings. So that'll be exciting. We'll kind of have something specifically for them to work on while they're there. But yes, if we can coordinate with you on where are the right venues to go to reach different demographics, then we'll set up appropriate listening sessions with each one.
So I know our next big step, I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
I had some more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
You can go first.
No, I was gonna move on to the next thing. Good.
So I was going to ask, what are the other alternatives to providing surveys to the community?
So there's charrettes where we meet with them with trace paper and we do hands-on drawing sessions with them. There are more passive ways where we put out, I guess the most common way I've seen it is with chalkboards at site, and we ask people to literally write in stuff. So then people who maybe don't feel comfortable coming into a public setting or a group gathering have a way to write in. We could also do something like that here at the building where there's kind of a drop-off area to submit or kind of write in comments. There's also more specific kind of stakeholder interviews where if there's a specific group or organization that's a little more formal, they can come and kind of, we can ask them a series of specific questions and they can also do the same back to us. So those are kind of the other, I think, tools we have to engage with.
Wonderful. And then in regards specifically to the maps, I was just wondering how much, I know this is only tentative right now, but how much parking were you anticipating and including?
Sure. So we're kind of showing a range of up to 200 spaces in some of the options. It kind of varies between 150 and 200.
Okay,
And so that's like a formal striped parking area.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna say, I know the next big thing is October 20th, so do you
Yeah.
wanna go over what that step is? Cause I know
Yes.
we're just still in the beginning of all of this, so we have 2 designs to work off of, or ideas to start
Correct.
with.
Yep.
So what is
So-
next?
All right, so the upcoming meeting on the 20th. So we've got a plan for 6:30 at the Gibson House Community Center. This is an example of some of the other community engagement sessions we've done to just kind of give you an idea of what to kind of expect when you walk in the room. That, our team will be there to directly talk to people, and we'll have different things set up. Some of them will be visual boards like you see here for them to directly comment on, and then we'll also have breakout stations to work with people at. So just a diagram of what the room might look like, so there will be tables kind of dedicated to each scheme. We try to break it up so there's maybe, 8 to 10 at most at any one table so people don't get drowned out when they're talking to us. So a rough outline of how, we kind of see the session going is we'll kind of greet people and get them warmed up and looking at the boards that are up for the first 10 to 15 minutes. Then we'll kind of move into a brief presentation. It'll probably be a stripped down, curated version of what you're seeing tonight, just to update them on what's happened so far and what the schemes are about. And then we'll kind of break out into these tables. And basically 15 minutes we'll switch so you can go to the scheme that you didn't start at. We'll have members from our team, and I'm hoping from the township there at each table to be facilitators and talking and answering questions and getting feedback. And then our team will be capturing both in writing and photos what's happening at each station. And then we'll come back together as a group to kind of have each table talk about major takeaways and things they were hearing as a group. And then we're also hoping to kind of advertise a second online survey tonight. And again, between now and next week, if we can organize additional dates or plans for surveying, we would want to advertise it at this meeting to let people know what's coming.
So my question in regards to this is, I hope more than, what's 4 times 8, 32 people show up at
Yeah.
our community meeting. So are there multiple of these tables, or?
Yeah. I guess we haven't gone over in detail yet the exact size of the facility and what's available to us, but yeah, we'll be ready to staff as many tables as we can set up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I hope more than 30 people show up for a
Yeah,
community meeting.
it's just a diagram, so yeah, don't read into the exact numbers shown.
I understand.
Yeah.
So they're just basically moved from scheme 1 to scheme 2.
Yeah, and I think we would have a station purely for kids. We like to kind of give them paper and drawing implements and say, like, draw what you want to see in your park. And there's always good nuggets that come out of that.
Any comments on this?
Good idea.
I have one comment, because I thought that was a good point that Councilman Espinoza made about the parking. Will you give options for a number, and then perhaps pavilion size? Because I know there's a lot of kind of conversations around that with our public, that, you know, what's a ideal size of a pavilion or
Yeah.
a public gathering space, and then what kind of parking's needed for stuff like that? Or what, like how you were doing the comparison to other
Yes.
parks? Because I think people might think there needs to be more parking or less parking, or larger pavilions, smaller pavilions, so making sure people have options.
Yeah, we can, I'll think about the best way to put it, whether it's on the board or in the presentation, but yeah, we can give a kind of more specific breakdown of certain programmatic elements, and then what amount of parking generally supports that. You know, so if we have a playground of X size, we would anticipate it's this much parking. If we have a pavilion of this size, we anticipate it's this much. Yeah, we can put that together, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I'm glad she asked that. I'm glad you asked that, Gina.
Sure.
That's good.
That's all. Is that all for you?
Yes, yep, that's the end, yeah.
I'm like, wait, is there more?
Yep, no, that's it, we're done.
It looks really good, and I appreciate all the work that you and your team have done.
All right,
And
thank you.
I look forward to what the public is going to have to say as far as feedback-wise
So do
and
we.
whatever the next step is.
All right,
I
great.
So thank you
appreciate it.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's obvious you listen. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
I love it. Oh, awesome.
Thanks.
That was kind of hard with those little tiny letters saying, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, I'd